This is Reminiscing in West Central Minnesota, a Saturday KMRS news feature. Today in Reminiscing, we're talking with Mrs. Merton Smith from Morris. Mrs. Smith, could you tell us what part of the country you're born in?
I was born in Aurora County, South Dakota.
Now, your folks homesteaded in South Dakota. Where did your folks come from?
My father was born in Germany, and my mother was born in Pennsylvania.
There are a lot of people in your folks' generation that were homesteading. For most of the people around your neighborhood, homesteaders in?
Yes, I think as far as I know that all the neighbors were homesteaders at one time.
In fact, you heard so much about homesteading that you got to be a little bit older. You decided that you wanted to homestead yourself. Were there many women that decided that they were going to homestead some land?
Yes, I was a homesteader, and my neighbors that I got acquainted with outside of a couple of families, there were ladies came from Nebraska and homesteaded.
Well, tell us the qualifications. Were there some things that you had to do and you had to be a certain age and all this kind of thing? What are the qualifications if you wanted to homestead some land?
Well, you had to be age 21 years old, and then when you were filed on this land, you had to build a shanty or a brooder house or something to live in. You had to have 5 acres of land broke, and you'd have to have a well for water.
This land that you got a hold of, was that 160 acres? How much did that land cost you?
This was 160 acres, but I had to pay $2.50 an acre, and I had to live on it 14 months before I could prove up.
Okay, by proving up, then, this is the kind of the probation period that you had to prove that you could stay on the land. And what happened then after that? You were on for 14 months. Then you what? Got title to the land?
Then I had to go to Winter, South Dakota, and make an appointment there for a date to prove up. And and I had to, in the first place, I had to be there 14 months before I could do this. And I'd have to wait till they could find a date to give me. And I had to wait about 6 weeks before I got that date to prove up.
You know, this land in South Dakota, why is it there was land available?
Well, it was, in the first place, it was settled by the Indians, and the government wanted the white people to come out there and prove that up and turn it to raising cattle and farming. So that's what they did. And of course, like the people used to say out there, that the white folks pushed the Indians back. Well, I don't know. They were friendly. I gave Indians several meals at my house, and they were really nice people.
Well, now, farming today, I suppose, is maybe a little bit different in South Dakota, but back then, as far as the farming went, was it cropland or cattle, or what type of farming was it?
Well, everybody would have some cattle. Some people, there was one family there from Nebraska, they raised horses, and they sold colts. They raised colts, and they'd sell them horses, and they had cattle, and they farmed, and they raised chickens, and raised a garden. And if it did rain, we could raise everything you planted.
So in other words, rain back then was a problem just like it is this year.
That's right. It would be pretty dry, but we'd get some snow in the wintertime, and that'd go off, and they'd give everybody in interest to put a crop in, and if it had come up, it'd grow, and if it was too dry, it'd burn up. That'd be the end of that.
Well, you're talking about $250 an acre, 160 acres. That adds up to a considerable amount of money. How is it that a young lady that wanted to homestead had that much money?
Well, I worked, and of course I worked for 50 cents a day, and I'd work in the summertime when there was no school, $3 a week, and I saved that money. And I had money of my own, enough saved up of $300. And my father said that I shouldn't worry when I got ready to prove up, he'd let me have the money, so which he did, and it cost me about $600. But on my claim, when I was homesteading, I'd get a job to work, and I'd go take that job, and I'd get $4 a week. So I came out okay.
Mentioned that you had to break 5 acres of land, and breaking prairie sod is not the easiest job in the world. How long did that take you to do?
You mean to get this land broke? Well, I don't know. I hired a young man that had a breaking plow and a team of horses, and I don't know, he broke it about, in an afternoon, I would say, as far as I remember, and I paid him $4 an acre for it, too. It cost me $20. And the well, I had to have a well with some water in it. Well, a bachelor neighbor, come and dug that hole, as I called it, in the side of the hill, and there was my well. But I got my drinking water from my neighbor, the Dr. Schaus that was homesteading there. I'd get all my drinking water from there. I'd carry that up in a pail.
You're talking about your house. You called it a brooder house, and you mentioned it had to be at least 10 feet by 12 feet. Tell us a little bit about that house, what you remember.
Well, this house, they call it a shanty, or a brooder house. Well, that was built from the cheap lumber. They claimed that lumber was made out of cottonwood trees. Well, after this shanty was built, we lined it on the inside with building paper. I took a red color building paper and put that all around on the inside, and the outside they put on, what did they call that? It wasn't tar paper. It was something that was heavier than tar paper anyhow. We bought it in rolls. Of course, a couple of men, Dr. Schaus and his young man, they put that on for me. Rubberoid, they called it. Put that on. Well,
How much furniture did you have in that house?
Well, sir, I had a little stove that had 4 little lids on it, and I had a cot. I paid $5 for that cot that I had for a bed. And the table, I made my table, but that was made from scraps that the men folks didn't have to use building the little the shanty. And I don't remember what I had for a chair, but anyway, I guess I used a couple of nail kegs. I do remember I had picked up a couple of nail kegs somewhere, and there was my chairs.
Being alone out there in your own place in South Dakota, weren't you ever afraid?
I never was afraid. Never had to be afraid of anything, only the rattlesnakes.
There were rattlesnakes out there, many of them?
Oh, you can say that again. That hill where my shanty was built, there was 50 rattlesnakes killed up there on that hill. And I tanned 14 hides of the snakes.
Now, how do you kill a rattlesnake? How did you go about it? You shoot them, or how'd you kill them?
Well, if you had a lot of money and could afford to buy a hoe, that would be the nicest thing, but I didn't have that much money. And my father was a blacksmith, and he had a rod that holds a end gate in on a wagon box. He gave me one of them. And I carry that like a cane. And if I'd come up close to a rattlesnake, and of course he was coiled up there, he was ready to take care of me if I'd get too close. So I'd take this rod, and I would just swing that around till I knocked his head off. And that was goodbye rattlesnake.
I bet you haven't talked to too many people that are old rattlesnake killers, have you?
No, because people don't like me as it is. They think they're afraid of snakes. But, you know, the snakes never bothered me, and I'm still living.
Well, it sounded like you had quite a few experiences out there in South Dakota. Now, what happened when you finally proved up your land, as you say, and you got title to it? What did you do?
Well, after I proved up, I went back to my hometown, flanking to South Dakota. And, of course, by that time, I had met my husband, and we had been going together about a year or maybe a little better. And I just got ready, did a lot of sewing, and gathered up things to go back out there to go to housekeeping. So I got married then in February, and that was the end of homesteading.
Right, you farmed South Dakota, and then you came to Minnesota. Was it a lot different, the land in Minnesota, than the part of South Dakota that you lived in?
Oh, my, yes, there's no comparison. Minnesota is a wonderful, wonderful state. Out there, it was nice out there. Grass, cattle would just get so fat on the grass, that buffalo grass, that